Welcome to the Theory of DFS podcast. I'm Jordan Cooper, the co-author of the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports. It's a 15-hour audio DFS masterclass at theoryofdfs.com. Joining me as not as usual. Last week we had Warren Kosoy on, but Eric, you're back this week, and in looking at your Twitter, you have a lot of things to say about best ball.
I do.
Apparently,
I do have. I
uh,
do have a lot of things to say
I
about
don't
that.
want to necessarily turn this into the best ball episode because
Hmm.
I don't play best ball, and two reasons. One, uh, I don't want my money tied up for that long.
Yep.
I'd rather invest it elsewhere. Uh, because I could just put it in like the stock market. I look at that percentage as like if you can't beat the S&P, then why am I bothering?
Yep.
Uh, for that long time period. Now, obviously in DFS, you're churning like every day, so I'm not gonna if it's gonna affect my DFS bankroll, I would definitely not play best ball. But obviously, I have
Hmm.
enough of a bankroll that if I wanted to, I could play it. And secondly, like I like being good at things. Like it's weird. It's weird because I don't think I'll be bad at best ball, but it's like once I start spreading myself out too thin with the things that I do, I'd rather make sure that I'm 100% focused on this. Like we have the Euros coming up for soccer, so I'm
Yep.
gonna start playing some of that. So some of my baseball so I may not play a baseball slate because I'm playing a soccer slate. While other people are
Hmm.
like, I don't mind playing six things at once, and if I play them 85% well, that's still good enough for profit. Like I'm just not comfortable with that type of situation. So I
Hmm.
get best ball. I get structured drafting. I get like the spike weeks. I get like with zero RB, those types of strategies that probably
Yeah.
90% of people don't get to begin
Right.
with. Uh, so like I don't think I'll be bad at it, but I think your takes on how the I don't want to call it the community, but how the industry community, the average player plays best ball is very similar to what we discuss on this show as it is when it comes
Yep.
to playing GPPs in DFS, where like your goal and let, am I wrong to say that in best ball you play more like how I play GPPs? Like you're playing these contests where like you're in a league, but you're all competing against. You want that $1 million prize, so
Yep.
you're devising teams that have more of a shot at that $1 million prize, not the best shot at winning your 10 or 12 team league. Like you don't that would be like the cash game version or the small field, right? If
Correct.
you're playing the whatever, the FF whatever initials, I don't know. I'm not in the season long space. What FFW PC, whatever, the main event, whatever.
If you just pick two other pick two other letters, there's probably an acronym somewhere with FF, and then pick every other
Right.
combination of letters that exists. Yeah.
Right, but in these drafts that you're doing for best ball, you're building teams that have more of a likelihood of scoring so well that you have a shot at the $1 million prize, even if you end up. It turns out that you come in last place in your league and you're not even
Yeah.
close.
Exactly. So there's a couple things, a few things to kind of unpack. Well, first of all, it is that I enjoy like drafting. I think if you come up doing any season long fantasy type stuff when you're younger, I mean the underdog folks, Jeremy and formerly the draft. I mean they've just nailed it. That like a lot of the fun, the majority of the fun for most people of playing these types of leagues is like the actual draft. And so that's what you get to do, right? In this, and I never have to touch it again because I don't want that's similar to how you don't want to tie up your money for best ball and all that. I don't want to put the effort into the season long teams because I'm spending most of my week during the football season or during baseball, basketball, whatever, playing DFS and doing other stuff. And so the management of those teams is just absolutely of no interest to me, doing waivers and trades and all that kind of stuff. Of no interest. So the best ball, you kind of get the best of both worlds. And I really, really do believe we're starting to see like a boom in this. I'm not saying season long is going to go away, because that's not true. But I think best ball is going to kind of become this new bridge between what normal people think of, the traditional fantasy football, traditional season long stuff, and DFS, which is very clearly a different game. And it's not hard, but it's not quite as, everybody knows how to like draft a fantasy football team, like in general, right? Basic fantasy football is like, stay at home moms and people who don't even watch football or care about gambling or care about fantasy football have probably been in some kind of fantasy football league. DFS is like, oh, there's a salary, and there's, all of these kind of unique positions like flexes and utilities and all this kind of stuff that just make it a little bit of a steeper learning curve, a little bit more difficult onboarding process. And so I'm really bullish on best ball, like as a space. And we've already seen the thing that allows me better to kind of lock up this money for an extended period of time is the upside we're now seeing in these contests. You can spend $20 and the upside is $1 million. So the upside of me putting $20 into the stock market, my returns are probably, my money is safer for sure, but and I can, in certain spots make a significant amount of money, but like I'm probably not turning $20, unless I'm Dogecoin or something like that. I guess I can turn $20 into $1 million. But there's this upside now that, like, I'm not spending money that, like you said, that I would feel uncomfortable taking away from my DFS bankroll or sports betting bankroll or anything like that. So that's like number one. That's
Is this one long way of saying that I'm too much of a nit to play best ball?
Well, we already knew that. Yeah.
Right. Okay.
So
Okay. I just want to because I would want to play those content, because that's because I'm not only tying up my money, but I'm tying up my money in a very risky investment. So it's like
so
the
here's what I
type
would
of
say.
thing. If I wanted to draft a whole bunch of teams and spend $2,000-$3,000, like it has to be like I treat GPPs in DFS, where it's
Exactly.
like it's quite possible I get a negative 90% return, and and truthfully it's only one slate, right? It's one season. All right. I
Right.
mean, it's like if I don't draft, and I and then you get the diversification, just like I would do in GPPs,
Mm-hmm.
of like, well, I'm not going to just draft the same guy in 50 of my drafts or something, unless obviously you think you're gonna get something there. Are there any that this is, because this would be more up my alley? Are there any auction best balls?
Not well. So not
That
in
was the
this.
format that when I played season long, like I always played in auction. Like I'm a hardcore
Yeah.
purist, right? I
Yep.
want to like I don't mind the best ball concept of you basically draft once and you don't have to make any transactions or nothing. I'm fine with that. But I like the concept of like there's no such thing as like the first pick. It's
Yep.
you have the budget
And
and now you're
I
competing
agree.
against, you know, 11 other people, 10 other people, 14 other whatever the size league. And it's like there's a strategy on when to bring up certain players, right?
Oh,
And you could have, if you want Christian McCaffrey for $38 more, you can, if you could build a team, and then you take these $1 backup running backs and hope that and then there's so many other different types of strategies when it comes to auctions. But obviously that takes a lot. That's number one. You need all the people there at once. You can't have
yeah.
these drafts where it's 5 hours in between picks, or slow drafts where you could do
Yep.
it on your own time. So even like my edge to me would be in more of an auction type of thing. But they can never run $1 million prizes for those
No.
types of leagues.
And I think stuff like that is coming. And like I said, I'm just bullish on the best ball space in general. But what I was going to say that I think is more geared towards you is a lot of what you talk about in terms of like why you play the large field contest and why you are playing
A lot
100,
of dumb money, a
150.
lot of dead.
I believe there's plenty of, again, let's preface this by, there's plenty of smart people out there. There's other great content creators and sites and touts, whatever, doing good work, and they're doing a good job, and I think that they're smart, just like it exists in DFS. But I think this is right now more like when we talk about, we're like, oh, it wouldn't be like this 5 years ago. That's where we are right now in best ball. Like there's people, every draft you're in, basically every draft, there's dead, like at least one like totally completely dead team. So we're talking one out of 12.
Someone taking Aaron Rodgers with 1.03.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
So even in these, and like right now, I would consider the drafts like sharper people, right? People aren't that interested yet. The majority of casual consumers are not that interested yet in fantasy football drafts. So like this is like the relative, a little bit sharper portion of the crowd. And like you said, yeah, there's somebody that takes some agree, this 12th round guy in the second round, or there's like issues with like auto drafting. Like you step away from your phone or your computer for a stretch and you start auto drafting, and next thing you know, you got 4 quarterbacks, right? Which is bad. In case anyone doesn't know, it's not good to have that many, 4 out of your 18 players to be quarterbacks, or 6 tight ends or whatever. So there's like so many different aspects to there being the competition is just incredibly soft. That's setting aside my like strongest beliefs, which are the things that you and I talk about on this podcast, like in terms of the fact that this thing is a game and people should be approaching it as a game and trying to find their way to the top of, to accomplish the goal of winning this game. I don't think people are, even the smart people are not doing that.
Well,
yet, right? Like
from my perspective, in one aspect, like, and understand, if you're listening to this right now, I don't play best ball. I'm going to be saying things, theorizing based on what I know and my experience. I've done draft leagues in the past. I've played fantasy football season long. What I find in my Twitter timeline, at least, I don't necessarily read season long stuff because it doesn't apply to what I do. That people focus, it's very similar to DFS when they focus on exposures in their lineups, that they focus too much on like ADP value.
Mm-hmm.
Like I got a guy in the 5th round that has an ADP in the 3rd. Like I was able to get a 3rd round guy in the 5th round, and I'm like, to me I view that. You set me straight because you know way more about best ball than I do. That's like that to me. That's like cash game type thinking of like, well, you got extra value. It's like, okay, you have more value to possibly score better in your league, but is your team structured in a way to capitalize on when it doesn't matter that you got a guy that has, let's say you have some 3rd receiver that has an ADP in the 8th round, and you picked him in the 6th round, but then so you picked him above board, but then for some injury happens or something happens where, well, he's the type of player that if something happens the right way, he ends up becoming wide receiver 1 on his team, and that team overperforms, and now he's sitting at 1,200 yards and 14 touchdowns. And it's like, does it matter that your draft capital, like, truthfully, he has a performance now that he should have gone in the 2nd round. And you got him in the 6th, even though he's currently being drafted in the 8th. So to me, I view all of that as like people, like, they're judging it based on median and not based on like what's the rest of their lineup. Like that, taking that guy in the 6th round when you probably could get him in the 8th makes more sense on the team that you're currently building because of another player that you have. Like if you end up with a wide receiver from one team, it's like you're more likely to have a quarterback from that team. So, yet, is it worth, even though this quarterback is being drafted in the 12th round, it makes more sense for you to just take him in the 10th or 11th before someone else does, because he makes more sense because he's correlated with your team, even though people would look at that pick and go, wow, you got hosed there. Is that the type of thing that you're like ranting against strategically on Twitter, where people are focused too much, like we say this in DFS, too much on players and not enough on lineups?
Yep. That is so that, there's a tipping point, just like we talk about with DFS, when it comes to, giving up too much projection, too much value, too much whatever. And so like you are trying to, using your specific example, you are trying to stick as close to as you can to that ADP, right? Because you don't want to be giving up, whether it's, from a DFS perspective, I don't want to give up so much projection for the benefits of the correlation and the game theory aspects and all of that. So you're just towing that line, right? And so like I'm always kind of trying to hover as close to their
Right,
ADP as you can, but it's
not
not
drafting a
because of
wide receiver in the second round, and it's like I might as well take his quarterback in the third. It's like you shouldn't be taking quarterback. You shouldn't be taking Andy Dalton, right?
yeah,
Like in the third round, just to make sure you have the correlation. Just like you could probably get him in the 14th or say. I mean, you could
yeah,
you know
exactly.
like that's you're giving that would be the example of giving up too much projection for the sake of
Yep.
correlation and leverage.
Right, but to your point, you said it perfectly at the end, which we say constantly, and you have kind of summed up well over a long period of time. Is it is about, so in this example, it is about the team that you built. It is not about any of the players are chess pieces to create, to make your moves on this team and build this team that needs to have, and there's a million ways to build a team, right? Like you even said, there's zero RB. There's everybody's got a new name for every stupid ass strategy that everybody's already been doing for a long time. But anyway, they're like the team, those 18 or 20 DraftKings says 20 players. Those 20 players have to be the right pieces all fit together, and it has absolutely nothing to do with, right, like, oh, I got so and so, and so and so's a fourth rounder and he fell to the sixth. That's fine. That can be a good thing, right? Like that can be absolutely a good thing because it boosts your projection, it boosts your ceiling and all that. But you could still make an absolutely horrible team with a bunch of guys you got as good values, right? Because you didn't construct the team, according to the rules of this game that you're playing, and to give you the possibility of what, like, that's the other thing. I think I hear a lot. People are like, well, you just got to win I just want to win my league and then kind of see what happens. Right.
That's like min cashing in GPPs.
Exactly. I'm like, if I win one league out of 150 and it wins the $1 million, do you think I give a shit? Do you think I give a shit that I got that many through? I understand what they're saying though, right? Like I'm trying to get shots on goal. The more teams I get through, the more chance I have to advance. And like I'm not trying to call anybody out. These are smarter guys. I know that they're making good teams, but I just think that methodology is backwards. And so, like,
it's very similar. I just want to highlight it's very similar to PGA DFS, where a lot of people will say, like, my whole goal is to get 6 out of 6, and then what happens from there is out of my control. And it's like there are certain golfers that I can make a lineup that has much more maximization of 6 out of 6, but actually has less win probability than guys that are more likely to be the first round leader or be like you don't even bother watching on Friday because they either have to shoot the course record just to make the cut,
or they hit the back 9 on Thursday and the back starts tightening up, right? Like the Jason Days, right? Oh shit, just made triple, my back started
right. But I play those guys when I play
okay.
PGA DFS.
Same.
Like my number one guy that I would play is Louis Oosthuizen, and I just have to set my alarm for about 10 minutes before lock to make sure that if he withdrew or not. I mean, like. But that would cause him to go low. I mean, and he would play some of these fields where, like, he's 8,400 or something, and like Patton Kazire is 10,000. Like he's playing in like he's a much better golfer than most of these guys in the field. But he's withdrawn twice. He's he has been on a 5-week layoff, and then he's 7% owned when he really should be 20% owned because people just don't want to play the guy that we had Henrik Stenson a couple of years ago. He had a couple of mystery, like after 8 holes, I'm done. Like obviously, I'm like you're too over. I mean, you're nope, he's done. So then his ownership started going down. But people are so concerned about. I want to make sure all my guys make the cut, and it's like how many times am I playing Stuart Sink? How many times is he going to win the tournament? I mean, yes, he'll make the cut 90% of the time, but like T34. And when I'm playing large field GPPs, it's like I'd rather use that spot on a guy that could win.
Exactly.
I think in best ball, I'm assuming you're drafting teams that some people would look at and go, "What are you, nuts?"
Yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing is you don't even have to get as crazy as I think people think. We talk about it in DFS too, right? People go way too far. Like I'm playing all 1% guys, when the leverage is high, but the win probability is so freaking low that you're just burning money, or they go too far the other way, right? They're just playing all chalk. And I think best ball is like an even massively more extreme version of that, where like the thing that's become kind of popular because the guy who won the underdog draft, the underdog big contest last year for 200 grand, did what now we're calling this hyper fragile, which is really funny because I don't even think it's that fragile. But he's only taking 4 running backs out of 18, and he's taking them early, and then like just being like, okay, those guys got to stay healthy, and those guys got to be my running. I'm only counting on those guys. And like it's funny because now that's become all the rage solely because everybody just
Yeah, but the problem is that this is why I like auctions better than drafts, is that the only way that it's fragile is if everyone else is doing something different.
Yes.
So I can understand that strategy. So I'm thinking just game. I'm just remember I don't play best ball. I'm just thinking theoretically that if when I use everyone, it doesn't have to be everyone, but if a majority of the people in your league are going with the robust, hyper fragile, like I'm just going to take Saquon Barkley and hope he stays healthy. That works in an environment when most of your opponents are aiming for 0 RB, right? Because you're getting guys that the other guy that you're getting higher ADPs, right? Because you're able to get better guys in the second round or the third round because everyone else is taking wide receivers, right? And then they're going to pick up these running backs in the 7th, 8th, 9th round type of thing. Well, but if everyone's playing 0 RB, like the best strategy in that league would be to be able to get like a top running back in like the second round because all these wide receivers, like you see what. Like, it's like, dude, you could pick up this guy with the 7th pick when he should have gone 2nd overall. But that's only because the people in your league, like, it's a finite thing. Like, it's not like DFS where you could just pick anyone you want under the salary cap. There's an ownership, like, how much this guy is worth to you depends on their ownership, but you could play anyone you want. In these drafts, like, once a guy is gone, it's gone. So do you think that a lot of people that are looking into these strategies, like, you also, I think it was you on Twitter, that you discount a lot of the previous analysis in past year. Like, well, what worked last year and what worked the past 3 years? And it's like, that's the very, very same thing of like, well, what worked the past 2 weeks of MLB slates? And go
exactly.
Well, 5 of the times it was a 5-1-1-1 that won, and 2 of the times of like, dude, it's such a small sample size. Like, what worked last year? And also, the team that won, like, the 200,000 or whatever may actually have been an outlier, and more of the top 1% of lineups actually had a much different construction and, like, the variance of, like, like we see in baseball. We see plenty of times a lineup. We'll have a 15-game slate tonight, and on a 15-game slate, you're always stacking. Right? Well, it's easily possible that a lineup that is essentially a 1-1-1-1-1-1-1, right? That wins first place for 100,000 tonight on DraftKings or whatever, and people will go, well, that's what I should be doing. But they don't realize like the next 200 lineups are all 5-3s, right? It's like yeah, 1 out of a million shot lineup ended up winning. But why are you focusing so much on that winning lineup and not? Even if you're going to do that small sample size analysis, shouldn't you be doing it on like the top 1% of lineups, top 0.1% of lineups, rather than just the winning lineup? Because now it's a small sample size and it's a possible outlier. And how many, you don't have enough, what, for the past, when I see this is what worked last year, I'm like, dude, last year? That's it? Like, if any, and best ball hasn't been around long enough to say this is what's happened the past 20 years. Or anything. So do any of those things matter? If anything, you do it as reconnaissance. If everyone is saying like last year this worked, all that means is that strategy will be overowned, and then you invoke a strategy that isn't. Or with recent, I want to ask you about recency bias. So I'm interested. These are questions that I'm theorizing stuff, and you tell me if I'm on the right path. NFL has so much more parity than other sports. Like, you're not, like, what we say in DFS, like, the first week of the season, oh, the Rams defense is great. Like, Dude, we don't even know that yet.
Yep.
Right? Personnel changes, coaching changes. Do you like what I would do, like similar to like the vomit stack type of approach on with DFS, is that like if there's a coaching like for instance, I take a look at the Jets and I go, Adam Gase sucks. Adam Gase's offense sucks for fantasy purposes. Like who says that? Who says? Am I saying the Jets go 12-4 or whatever? They have 17 games this right now. Now it's what 12-5. They're adding an extra game.
Yep.
But can the Jets go 7-9 and have like a couple of weeks where like they put up 36 points on some? I mean, and do I have a stack of that? Do I have wide receivers or whatever or a running back? I don't know. I don't even know who's on what team anymore because I don't care about it until like a week before the first DFS slate. But is it the type of thing that you do that you take a look at? Have there been any significant personnel changes? And people will just assume that the team that was good last year is good this year, regardless. I know that narratives change, like for the Titans, right? Because they're getting Julio Jones. I mean, like those types of moves. But I'm talking about just like coaching moves. Like, is Patricia still coaching the Lions?
No, but they somehow hired somebody who's maybe even more of a boomer, and they're going to be a stone disaster. But to your point,
but that's the point that I'm making. Like, instead of if there's a coaching change, like we saw, but people either overvalue or undervalue it. Because I remember when Kingsbury went to the Cardinals, and all of a sudden it's like got to get Murray, got to get all these Kirk because it's going to be air raid just like in college and stuff. And that didn't do badly, but it didn't work out to the ADPs that people were drafting the Cardinals stacks.
Right. The horizontal raid as Rich Rebar coined it. Everybody thought it was going to be.
Right. People are trying to make Andy Isabella happen every week.
As someone who tried to make Andy Isabella happen, I can confirm, yes, that's what we were doing. But your point, what I would summarize it as is, again, it's a perfect parallel to DFS, but it revolves around uncertainty. Right. There's especially coming into a brand new NFL season, there's so much uncertainty, like a ton, whether it's coaching changes, there's always an influx of new players because of rookies, be free agents, whatever. Like there's constantly a bunch of coaching changes. Even when there's not head coaching changes, there's offensive coordinator changes and defensive coordinator. There is so much but the field picks and chooses, just like in DFS, what things they believe and what things are too murky for them to invest in. So it's funny you brought up the Jets because the Jets are one of the first articles I did of the year, and I basically outlined exactly what you just said. I'm like, every Jets player is free, basically, in these best ball drafts. They've rid themselves of this atrocity of a coaching staff with Gase and Greg Williams and such. And the point is, I have no idea. Maybe they will be just as bad, but the cost is free to find out. And if they happen to be even just remotely decent, like you said, and they don't even have to win games. Frankly, I don't give a shit if they win games. If they lose, it might be better for their offense because their defense.
But at least they're throwing the ball and not running Frank Gore into the line 26 times when they're down 2 touchdowns.
Exactly. So that's literally all you need to happen for the offense to have enough upside to like be good for you in these best ball formats. Is not, like you said, is throw more than 20 times when you're down by 30 in the second half. But like that people have decided, and I don't mean like that's the other thing is like these guys are all drafted, right? So it's not like in DFS where it's like this guy was 0% or this guy was 1%. So clearly the public decided that this, everybody is pretty much getting drafted, but they're deciding with where they're drafting these players, right?
Also, it matters how they're structuring their lineups.
Yes.
Like, I don't think anyone is structuring their lineups around the Jets.
But that's another lever that sharper players can pull is that you want to have stacks in your teams, and so as you're you have to be able to adapt on the fly, right? As you're drafting this team, if the stacks come together naturally early on with some earlier teams, like the Cowboys or the Seahawks or whatever, where you kind of have some expensive players, but sometimes the draft doesn't come together for you that way, or you draft an early quarterback, so now I don't want to invest more of my heavy capital into another quarterback when I have Dak Prescott or Kyler or Lamar or whatever. So now I want to be waiting. Well, but I also want to be cognizant of the fact that I would need to be correlating with that second quarterback. Well, the Jets are like, the fallback plan. They're just the perfect fallback plan. Their quarterback goes in the 15th round, and all their wide receivers go like round 12 or later or whatever. So it's like, but having that now understanding of, how you should be constructing your teams and keeping it in mind as the draft proceeds, it's just like things that people don't do, and people don't, I kind of would call it like backdooring a stack, right? Because I'm not building out my team with this Jets stack in mind, because nobody is doing that. But everyone is like, okay, I got Julio Jones, now I have to stack the Titans. And it's like, no, not really. Like, I got Tyreek Hill, I got to stack the Chiefs. They're always building it around like, what's the thing that just happened in my draft at the beginning of my draft? And it constantly leads people into like trapping themselves in these drafts. So it leads to this dead money thing, like I was talking about.
It sounds like it leads to, this is, and similar to DFS, it leads to lineups that have high min cash equity, right? Because now they're building a line, like all these Tyreek Hill lineups look the same because they have Mahomes, like all these, and you're picking Mahomes at a certain spot that's going to be average to most drafts. So like your cheap stacks look, dude, there's thousands of others of 20-man lineups that look pretty much similar. Yeah, maybe on the bottom, right? You have a different, fourth wide receiver or some third running back or some whatever bound there. But for the most part, if that lineup, that lineup, like just like in GPPs, because it's owned, it basically, that lineup is correlated to a lot of other lineups that look like that. Means that it has to score even more points to possibly win the million, and you have to get that one right, whatever. But with your lineup, if you structure not around like that, your lineups have a simpler path to first place. It's like, as long as the Bears overperform this year, because people think they're not, right? And the Jets do well enough, it's like, I don't care what the Chiefs do, because those Chiefs teams will be, they've expended so much of their capital on first, like they're not going to score enough of a floor. Like as long as my 12th round stack goes off for enough points, it's like I'm going to accumulate enough. Obviously injuries and stuff happens, but I mean, to me it's the same as DFS. I mean, like it's the same thing as DFS. The only difference is that you're drafting in fucking June. And who the fuck knows? I mean, then it's total uncertainty. I don't call these best balls. These are uncertain balls, right? Because like now, I mean, is there something to that? Like you're drafting now, obviously, as we talk about in the course with game theory, perfect and imperfect information, or complete and incomplete information. That, do you believe that there's more of an edge the less information that's available, or the more information? I'm not even talking about like studying the players, but I mean, we're not even sure who makes the team type of thing. We don't even know who the starting quarterback is going to be. Like, because there's enough lack of information even a week before the first regular season game of the season. Obviously, you're going to get some information during preseason, right? You're going to get during training camps or something. But even then, there's still enough uncertainty. Well, there's an edge there, but more people know about the uncertainty. But now in June, like, wouldn't you consider that if you took outside of the game theory element of drafting, two people with the same amount of like information, that one person with more information on who could possibly start and who could, and someone that doesn't know anything, do you think that there's so much variance from now until September that like even a bad player could end up, if they structured their draft with some correlation, could end up actually doing well, and that the sharper players should be more likely to wait until the week before the start of the season, because people, when they do make mistakes, are going to be dramatic mistakes. Because now it's very hard. Like, yeah, there are dramatic mistakes in drafting, like just the style, like where you pick quarterbacks, where you pick certain players. But as far as like taking flyers on people, it's like, well, no one knows anything. So like, by you taking a guy in the 5th round and I taking him in the 8th round, like, did it matter? The variance between, because we don't know how that's going to shake up. But a week before, if you're some casual player that's like, well, I'm going to draft this guy, and like Like I've seen some lineups a week before, because obviously people post and make fun of other people, right? And they go, look at this league. Someone like drafted a guy that literally got like cut the week before, and drafted him in like the 5th round, and it's like that's such a big mistake that you have enormous edge. But that player taking that player in the 5th round now, well, no one knew he's cut. I mean, like the Leonard Fournette situation last year, right?
Yep.
Where
Yep.
people like, well, he's cut, but he's going to get signed from another team, and people were acting like depending on your, and people are taking a guy that has been cut in like the 3rd round, and it's like, yeah, they ended up getting bailed out to some extent because they ended up signing with the Buccaneers, but like, aren't you more likely to find, you're more likely to find the average player gets better because the information is more known, but the bad players get worse because you could make such a big mistake that it essentially destroys your entire team.
It's absolutely correct, and it's also funny that you brought this up because I wrote about this. Like,
oh, you did? You wrote about it. I didn't even read it.
So when I'm doing my drafts, like, okay, so preface it with I'm trying to do 150. Max entry is 150 teams on Underdog, and DraftKings also has their own version of Millie Makers. Basically, are these tournaments, and so I spent some time thinking about what you just proposed.
Because you have a max of
right?
150, which means once you get to 150, you're done.
There's nothing more.
You could choose to do all 150 now.
Yeah.
So you have to. So part of the strategy is even like if you're going to play that many lineups, like when do you draft?
Exactly. And so I spent some time like thinking about that. I wrote about it on RG, and I basically, like we do with a lot of things, I ultimately decided the best way is to take like a barbell approach. And it is, I'm doing essentially, right, it's never perfect, but about half, now early, and then half as close to the season as I can get, right? Assuming I'm monitoring if it's filling or whatever. Like you said, I'm trying to get as close to the season, and then also like kind of in the most incomplete information scenario as I can get, because there, in my opinion, there's like kind of 2 levers, if you will. The one right now is this incomplete information allows me to get value in the like projection and win probability, upside lever that I would be pulling, because I can just build teams that are not going to be possible later. Am I going to have some? I'm embracing the uncertainty and the risk of players getting cut, players getting traded, players not making the team, whatever, in order to hopefully construct some teams that are just not, it's not physically possible, right? It's like if I had a chance by building a DraftKings team at 8 a.m. to unlock $10,000 and more in salary, right? It's just that I'm also going to, build a lot that end up maybe
right. Was that a situation last year with Tyreek Hill? I remember last year Tyreek Hill
was in the 12th round.
Right, like he was going to be suspended possibly or whatever like that, and then like the early drafts, like he was going really low, and then like people started complaining that it's like, well, once he was not, and like he ended up like playing, it's like, well, those teams have to be the winner. Like, this is a guy that should be taken in the first 2 rounds that was taken in the 12th, but that only happened because of the time that it was drafted with the information that was known. So you want to at least have some teams that benefit from that.
That's correct. In understanding, right, that there's risk involved in that, right? And there's also the fact that I'm playing against the competition level is slightly higher with these. These are in general, these are the better drafters, right? The sickos like me drafting in May and June are just naturally a little bit more skillful players. So I'm giving up some of that competition advantage, and I'm embracing a lot more risk in order to, like you said, hopefully land on a couple of teams that kind of hit the nuts, right? Because of the access to potentially that extra salary cap, like we might be able to get. And then I'm going to the opposite end, right? Where like, okay, I really don't have any information edge, but my competition edge, my skill edge is so much higher across, in general across these drafts, because it's all the, last year DraftKings.
I know they gave away all those.
They gave away. Yeah, and I mean it was an absolute stone disaster. Like you talked.
It turns out you could make better teams a week before than you could, even with the Tyreek Hill situation. Because I remember, I mean, I didn't play any of them, but I just remember my Twitter timeline being like, dude, they gave away so many so many free stuff and whatever to just random people that either were auto drafting or were just selecting
Hmm.
anyone. And I would see, like I saw like backup running backs going in the first round. And it's like
It
how
was,
you could build super teams if you have like two or three guys in there that are just drafting like random names because it's like everyone gets moved up. And then people complaining about like, well, now this makes the teams that I built a week ago like look pale in comparison. But from a statistical perspective, it's not as like oh well I drafted these teams have to win. Like those teams didn't win.
Tyreek. So that's also what's
So
really
many
funny
people
is
because of injuries. Like it seems like I was able to get this guy, this, and it's like you're listing off all the season-ending injuries, right?
right,
Like
right.
all the teams that were able to get like the McCaffreys and the Barkleys and all that type of stuff. Julio Jones who was out, Michael Thomas, right? It's like look, people were looking
Yes.
at their teams going, look, I got McCaffrey, Barkley, Michael Thomas, and Julio Jones. Going, how do I lose? Well, you lose when two of them have a season-ending on injury and one only plays like 5 games. It's like that's part of fantasy football. So, like in and of itself, it turns out that the teams that you drafted that couldn't have put all those together actually did better.
Exactly. But people don't think about that. Going back to your, people are viewing it like more like cash games, and people are thinking about it with players and ADP and not teams or lineups. That's how everyone thinks. They're like, look, I put this superstar squad together. Whereas maybe I do. I don't even really know, what my teams look like. I don't know if I have any superstars. Because like I said, I'm not really paying attention to that. I'm trying to put together 150 well-crafted teams, right? I want 150 lineups in this GPP that have maximum win equity, right? And people also don't understand, because these are a lot of season-long people coming over, or maybe they do play DFS, but maybe they're not DFS tournament gurus. The difference, even from last year, going back and referencing what won that underdog tournament last year, it was like 25% the size, the contest
All right,
was
so now this is even
of
big.
the,
Now you need even more leverage. You need even like the wackier stuff.
yeah. But people don't, again, people aren't thinking about that, because they're thinking about these players and how do I maximize my ADP value, right? And like, oh, okay, I know I probably have to stack and maybe I have to do something a little bit crazy or whatever, but they're just not thinking about it in the right way. And the difficult part can be that drafts never fall perfectly your way, right? You could be on your path to this perfectly well constructed team with a couple of great stacks and a fragile, a really nice fragile build, and it just falls apart because you get some idiot takes your quarterback, like you said, two rounds early. But that's why I'm doing 150, right? Just trying to get it right over the course of this
And
entire
it
thing.
doesn't
But I
mean that,
really
and it
believe,
doesn't mean that you're playing like oh the Jets. It doesn't mean that you're playing. It's not like oh I have Jet stacks in 100 out of my 150 lineups. I
yeah,
mean, like a lot of
right,
people look at it that way, going oh you're high on this. That means you must have them on like all your team. It's like no, it's the same reason why I'll stack the Tigers, but I'm not going to stack them in. If I'm playing 20 lineups, I don't have them in all 20 lineups. I mean, like, right? I
yeah,
mean, I'm not. I'm going to be more diverse than that, but I'm going to have more than my when I say like over the field, more than my fair share. So
exactly.
is that what you do in these best ball drafts? Because people would ask the same thing with lineups, not players. They go, so you're not gonna be high on the Chiefs or the Titans or whatever. It's like no, you could build high win equity lineups with Chief stacks. You're gonna have to get really weird somewhere else, or
Hmm.
you could do the thing of I'm gonna take no Chiefs, right? No, I'm gonna take the
Yep.
top teams, right? I'm not gonna take the Titans. I'm not gonna take, and I'm gonna just hope that they fail enough that like my, whatever you name other teams, Rams or whoever, and like the teams that are like in that second tier and go, I'm going to go have more of my fair share of that and then just hope the Chiefs don't put up enough points that or whatever. Or then you could also do the thing where like like you could do super rigid like handcuff type of strategy where it's like I'm going to go all in on one team. I'm going to go more on one team and you take like the quarterback, the running back and you take like 3 of their wide receivers because it's like, well, if this guy gets injured, I'm going to get the spike week out of this other guy. And if but now obviously you're taking up more spots on your lineup. So you're in a position where if this team doesn't do well, it's like you have no other slot. Like you're just starting to get really. Do you do any of those types of because I could see like people what I feel what people do at the later rounds is that they start taking those what ifs, the what if upside picks. Like what if this rookie, what if that is coming in as the 4th wide receiver ends up getting, ends up being, a 70 reception guy, but they're not correlating it to their lineups. It's just like, let me take a flyer here. And to me, it would make more sense when you're trying to go after that $1 million prize of, well, why don't you take Byron Pringle instead? And it's like, well, what's so sexy about Byron Pringle? Like, he's not going to break out. I said he's going to break out if 2 of the Chiefs wide receivers go down. And you already have one of them and Mahomes. So why don't you take one? But he's too because from a median perspective, he's a horrible pick because he's like the 4th wide receiver on the team. But if the Chiefs offense is a 14-3 team, and people took Hardman. Like who says if you take Tyreek Hill, why don't you take Hardman in the 12th round? Like that would be the natural thing to do. You're wasting a spot because you're not going to get points from both probably in the same week. But if Tyreek hamstring ACL first week of the season, like dude, you're sitting there with essentially a 1st round pick, 12, and take that guy rather than a flyer on some other team because it's not correlated with your lineup at all.
Exactly. And people don't think even just something simple like that, right? Like, okay,
So am I getting all of this right? Have I never played best ball yet? Yet based on what I'm saying, I probably should be with what I'm theorizing.
That's what I believe, right? I understand not wanting to lock up money for that extended period of time, but I believe, as you've seen me tweeting about and talking about,
I got to look to see who's on what team now.
Well, now
that's the problem. I don't pay attention to stuff.
The first year you're going to know who's on what team before
Thursday of the first.
Yeah, before you turn on Thursday Night Football. Oh shit, he plays for the Falcons now. But so it is absolutely that, right? It's all the DFS stuff that we talk about, lineups not players, and it's just little simple things like that, right? I stacked Russell Wilson with Tyler Lockett, and so I need a second tight end. Like I should be taking Gerald Everett and not Austin Hooper. Right. It's like
on your last pick, you should be thinking about taking like someone like David Moore, or
who is not on the Seahawks anymore.
See, that's what I mean. I don't even know I'm thinking of who's the 3rd wide receiver on the Seahawks.
But that exists. They have a rookie, Dwayne Eskridge, who is like a last or second to last round pick. But perfect same example. Do I like Dwayne Eskridge? No, he might not even play. I don't know, but he's the 3rd receiver for Russell Wilson. And so like if I need a late round receiver and I have Russell Wilson and I have, Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, whatever, I need to be taking him. And so that's
and also you need to be Eric, you need to be prioritizing that. Like you're more likely to say he's being drafted typically in the last round. Maybe you take him in the 2nd to last round because it's more important for me to get that guy because he's correlated. So you're going to give up ADP, give up projection for the sake of correlation. And so you believe what you're talking about. There's not enough people that are doing this.
That's correct. Most of your drafts, you won't see, people might stack, but it's all these variables, right? Again, keep saying it like with DFS. People might stack in their tournament teams, but they might not, right? They might give up too much projection, or they might be too chalky. Vice versa, they might, have a appropriately leveraged team from an ownership perspective, but there's not enough correlation, or again, the projection isn't. They're not. People aren't pulling all those levers in these best ball streets. It is that on steroids. Stacking is like a thing. People have generally figured that out.
Well, just like in NFL DFS, you see most lineups, quarterback, you're going to see a quarterback, wide receiver, but what's the things that we don't see enough people do? Those run backs, those, 3+1 quarterback plus 2 pass catchers and an opposing wide receiver. And it's like that extra correlation, not enough people do. And that's why sharp players tend to have more of the fair share of those types of
Yep.
lineups. But of course, those are more fragile because if the game doesn't go off, like that lineup's dead.
Exactly. And that's the same thing that's happening here. So, not to kind of keep beating the dead horse, but I just believe we're in this infant stage like we were years back in DFS. And so it's something that I want to invest my time and effort into because I think the edge is massive. And now, if we were just talking about, like you said, like the cash games, there's 12-man league, 10-man league, win first and get, make $100. Like, no, thank you. I'm not tying my money up for that. But there is now the requisite upside in this investment that I'm making where I'm, giving underdog fantasy my $25 for 9 months or whatever, but that $9 can turn into $1 million now. So it's
And you
kind of the
believe because
combination of a
people
lot
are
of these
drafting to, when you said before, like I'm just looking to win my league to be live. But that's the same in DFS of building a lineup to win like in a double up. And now you're treating your contest like the league isn't your entry. It's this $1 million prize pool that's
Yep.
your entry. So like winning the league is they're building cash lineups and hopefully having the upside. Because people do that in DFS, right? They're like, oh, I'm going to put my cash lineup in a GPP. It's like, well, don't put it in a large field GPP. It's like, well, what happens if it's the highest? What happens if it's the highest score on the slate? I said, if it ends up being a lineup that could win a large field GPP, you are a horrible cash game player, right? That's what you should take out of it. Okay, so your expectation should be this doesn't come first place in 100,000 entry field in NFL, right? Like it shouldn't be that. So being that that's not your expectation, why you drafting a team that is maximized to win a 12-team league, but not maximized to put up a score that could beat any other score of anyone that's playing in any league, and just for the sake of having more bullets. But Eric, that's how you take advantage of the small field, high stakes contests in DFS where you're like, that a lot of these players are either they're straight up playing their cash lineup, or they're playing a lineup that the projection lever is at its highest, and the correlation is there. They put enough, but the leverage is kind of like so it's chalk pitcher, chalk stack. It's going to be the two running back combination. It's going to be these two running backs are going to be in the main GPP. They're 30% owned, but in your contest they're 70% owned. And you're like, well, because I know that, I'm going to take advantage of the fact that I'm going to sacrifice this much projection, but get like 3 times the amount of leverage that I should be getting. And that's what you believe that in best ball now, people are building cash lineups. It's very I guess this is very similar to maybe DFS in like 2013. It's before I played, because by the time I started in 2015, some of these concepts like the stack correlation and ownership was a little bit more of a thing. Now it's obviously heavily a lot of a thing. But so I'm considered very similar to 2013, where I could go back and watch Roto Grinders shows from 2013, and almost everyone is talking about cash lineups and medians, types of who the best plays from a safe perspective, who's going to do well average wise, and no one's talking about, well, what happens if the Pirates go off today? Like no one talked like that, because there were large field GPPs, but people were like focused too much on how do I cash and then hopefully do well. And you're thinking that 5 years from now in 2026, you're going to be that someone like me, right? This is what I'm afraid of. I'm not going to play best ball, and then someone like me is going to start playing best ball in 2026. Going, if I would have known what I know now in 2021, right?
Exactly.
Because that's what I think now in DFS. It's like, dude, if I was playing, if I had the tools I had and knowledge I had in 2012, 2013, if I had the bankroll I had in 2015, like, dude, I'd be a fucking millionaire, right? I'd have several $1 million by now if I had the bankroll. Because 2015, I had to build up my bankroll. I didn't really have a big enough bankroll until maybe 2018. But by that time, my edge, like people were talking about what we talk about. It was like back then, Jesus Christ, I would have been 150ing and fucking crushing shit just like Sahil and Kandia.
Yeah,
So that's
no,
what you're
man,
hoping for.
that's
You're hoping for to have the early mover advantage. But why do you think that people are doing less of what you're talking is it the type of thing just like with what I say with Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, the course? Because I mean, I take a look at Levitan's content, I take a look at ETR, I take a look at like Leone and Dink and people that are good at best ball, Herzig, like the sharp guys know this.
mhm.
Like the content is out there. Like you're literally making it. So is it the type of thing where even though there is content saying like this is how you should be thinking of best ball, that just 95% of people aren't going to fucking do it?
Yeah, because it's a more difficult application actually, I think, which sounds crazy because people have a really hard time applying it to DFS, but it's it's a combination of things. It's also, like you said at the very beginning, it's one slate, right? So even though you're doing a bunch of drafts, you don't kind of get to see the results of this process of playing the game appropriately, right? I'm pulling all these levers on each draft perfectly, and I have no idea for a year, right? Right from right now, it's like 9 months. I don't know for 9 months if I was successful at it or not, right? And then we look back, we'll do the same stupid shit we're doing right now. We look back at last year and we say, oh, that won, that was successful. Maybe it's zero RB, right? So next year's like a zero RB team wins $1 million, and next year we're going to be like, oh, got to do zero RB.
Yeah, but
So
you're
there's
building
this
multiple types of lineups. So I mean, you're
correct.
probably building zero RB lineups as well as robust, as well as the like because you're playing 150 lineups, you're playing different strategies. So it's not like,
Yep.
oh, I just played this one strategy in 150 lineups, and if that's not the strategy that wins, like fuck it, like that, like you're being more diverse from that. But I'm just saying
Correct.
that the more people talk about structured drafting and spike weeks and less about these median ADPs, these mean cash type of mentality type of things for the large contest, for the $1 million type
Mm-hmm.
of contest, you just don't believe people are just going to read it and just not do it,
Kind of. That's what
or just not,
that's still
or
what
do you
happens
think
to
that
the
they'll read it, they'll want to do it in practice? It's very similar to poker. I could teach someone how to play
yes, yes,
like when I would
yes.
kind of coach people. I mean, I'd never coached, but people like, can you get me some tips or whatever? And anything they in the heat of the battle, they're still like, I'm not sure what I should be doing with this hand. And it's like, well, because you have to apply all these variables at once, and everything's always going to change. The table's going to be different, the people are going to be different, the chip stacks are going to be different. You just have to kind of know these concepts, and then estimate, and then make the best decision. And if you can't, like, you could understand it on paper off the table and go, I get it, I get it. But in the heat of make a decision in 15 seconds, like they end up going to their reptile brain of, like in best ball, the reptile brain is what's the best player available.
Yep.
And they could lie to themselves and say, what else was I supposed to do? I took the best player available, right? And I lost
Yep.
taking the best player available. No, you can't feel shame for yourself doing it that way. When you take a guy in the 7th round that most people are taking in the 11th, and it doesn't work out, like you look like an idiot, right?
Yep.
Now, when it works out, you look like a genius, but you're more likely to have success in these large contests by being willing to look like an idiot.
That's so your two examples are perfect. So I'm glad you brought it up. The first one is, these are live drafts with a 30-second pick clock, right? And so a lot of people are like doing them on their phone or whatever, or while they're doing something else. I do that too, right? I'm working and I'll just pop one up or whatever in an afternoon. And so those people, like you said, may know these concepts. They may read what I write or listen to Leone and Herzig or Levitan Silva, whatever, and be like, yep, that makes sense. I'm going to do that. And then they're on the clock in the 7th round, and they've drafted whatever, Tyler Lockett, and Russell Wilson was falling to him, and oh shit, the guy in front of me took Russell Wilson. Right? I was planning. I was going to get it. I was going to get my Seahawks stack, and now I don't know who. Like you said, who's the best player available? Well, you already took 4 running backs, but the best player available is a running back, and you click running back. It's like, but your team, like, it's over. Like, Could you win? Sure, but like you just made a minus EV team, and it's because in the heat of the moment, humans just make those mistakes because it is hard. I mean, I make mistakes too. It happens. You only get 30 seconds, and every draft is different. You generally know about who's available when and whatever when you start to do a bunch of them. But every draft is just like you said, like a hand of poker is just a little bit different. And so I think that there's a lot of skill in that the field needs a lot of time to catch up with. But then just the other thing is like that element of the GPP thing, right? This large field GPP. What you said, I forget exactly how you worded it, but the teams that can win those don't look good. You don't share
they look
those
like idiotic
Twitter.
teams. Like, why would you
share
do that?
those on Twitter, right? Everybody wants to. You don't have screenshot equity when you draft a team that probably has win equity in these
looks
contests,
like a genius,
right?
When you win, but you wouldn't want to show it to anyone beforehand.
Exactly. I show you my jet stack, and I took an early running back, but I never took a run. I basically don't have a second running back week 1, right? I have all these kind of guys, but that's the fragility thing. Like, especially right now, not only do I have, all of training camp, and so what if Alvin Kamara gets hurt during training camp? Latavius Murray is going in like the 14th round. It's like, okay, yeah, that looks like shit right now because I'm not even going to like score any points with my second running back, but like I'm just opening myself up to this fragile approach because I need those crazy outcomes in order for this team to win, right? But you post that on Twitter, they're like, what the fuck are you doing? They're like, what is that team? They're like, you give advice for this shit? You don't even have a second running back.
Well, look at me last year when I did the year before in baseball when I'm playing vomit stacks that no one else is, and people are like, "You're Tigers, Marlins, Pirates? What are you, an idiot?" Right? And then until the two times that it wins, and it's like, and then you have the other people. What put you on the Marlins? It's like, I play these fucking teams every goddamn day. I play vomit stack. Well, now I don't. Now I play the expense. I play the diamond stack.
You're right.
But it's the same type of thing, and it's the human. I think it's especially in our community, where especially if you're a content creator, like you look like an idiot if it's like, well, I'm taking a lot of Jets, I'm taking a lot of this. It's like, well, he's not an idiot if you actually read his articles of, like, he's just trying to build teams that could win first place, and if it doesn't, it comes in last place. Like it's they're going to look at showdown lineups, look at MMA lineups, look at when you're trying to not be duplicated.
Yep.
Those lineups look like in NFL Showdown. I mean, the common advice that I give is like, if you feel really uncomfortable about your lineup, it's probably a good lineup.
Play it.
If you feel really safe, if you're like, I think this one could win. If you actually think that, it's duplicated about 3,400 times, right?
Exactly. I can't remember a showdown slate where we got to the end of the game, right? We see the winning team, and everybody's on Twitter or in Discord or whatever. They're like, "What a stupid team! How did that team win first place? Oh, that guy solo ship. That's such a terrible team." You're like, "Well, that's the fucking point.
Right.
That is the exact point."
Except the Mariota backup week. That's siege brain.
That was siege brain.
Right.
Yeah, that was siege brain.
So, Eric, you're writing this some of this best ball stuff on Roto-Grinders, right?
That's correct. I've got I don't know, 5 or 6 pieces up. I'm just kind of that is one of the nice things of kind of getting out in front of some of this stuff. I have to do this for work, and so like it's just kind of like as the things come to my mind, or like as I experience it in a draft, or as I think more deeply about some of these things, I'm writing them up and trying to do exactly what you said. Like, yes, it'll be like, look, I like this team, but here's why, right? And here's the type of lineup or the type of draft that they would fit, right? Or whatever. I want to get exposure to this team, like you said, with the Chiefs, but here's when Tyreek Hill makes sense, and here's when Mecole Hardman makes sense. So I'm trying to always kind of put those kind of spins on different things, and a couple of pieces a week on average, 1 or 2.
Okay, so check that out on Roto-Grinders. Erik Beimfohr on Twitter. It was a best ball episode. It was uncertain balls or whatever. I mean, the same concepts of it. It's kind of funny how you have different variations of the same types of games, and the same concepts tend to apply. Just the mechanics are different of each game. So that's why people that are good at DFS are probably good at best ball, or probably good at poker, or probably good at any other types of peer-to-peer based games involving probability. And So all the stuff that's in the course, it probably to some extent applies to season long, to best ball, to stuff like that. So check out Erik's posts, and as always, the Theory of Daily Fantasy Sports, 15-hour audio DFS masterclass that you could pick up at theoryofdfs.com.